with that, I just really want to welcome Dr. McClay to our podium for the first time. He's another one of our speakers. He has an 11 o'clock plane. So he's here, squeezed it in, and we are just pleased to welcome him. Please join me in welcoming Dr. McClay.
One correction, this isn't my first time. I spoke about a similar subject, this book that I've published, at the meeting in Washington. So it's not my first time, and apparently I did well enough that you were willing to have me back. So I like to think I'm one of the good guys on campus, and there are not many of us. But anyway, and the book is here, Land of Hope, and is subtitled An Invitation to the Great American Story. And I'll talk a little bit about that title, that there. As I go, but I just want to let you see it. It was published by Encounter Books, which is not a usual textbook publisher. They've never published a textbook. But the beauty of publishing there is that I could write it exactly the way I wanted to. I didn't have to worry about textbook committees, about interest groups, about sort of PC commissars, which I think those in the big three, Pearson, McGraw-Hill, and Harcourt, they do have to worry about that. So I won't sing its praises yet too much, but I think it's different because the question that a lot of people ask, first of all, why do we need another textbook? Aren't there already a huge number of textbooks and put together by battalions of authors and editors and photo researchers with jazzy graphics and all kinds of beautiful things to draw in young people who we all know don't know how to read, don't have any interest in reading, can't read polysyllabic words and all of that. Well, I fortunately never got the word about that. What we don't have, and what I tried with the Land of Hope to provide, thank you. What I tried with Land of Hope, that's much better, yeah. What I tried to provide is a text that is inexpensive. A lot of these texts cost $150 or more. Authoritative and readable. I like to say compulsively readable, with wishful thinking perhaps, but and it will present to intelligent young Americans a coherent, persuasive, and inspiring narrative about their country. They need that. They need something that will shape and deepen their sense of the land of which they're a part and make them aware of that land's roots, equip them for the privileges and responsibilities of citizenship. And beyond that, to give them a sense of membership in that society, a sense that they belong, they're part of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, combined enterprises in human history, this exciting and immensely complex and consequential country. The existing textbooks do not do this. I can tell you, I've looked at them all. I have a gigantic pile of them on the floor of my study that I would periodically consult to see how do they handle this. They don't tell the American story with energy and conviction. They're much more likely to reflect the skeptical, if not outright hostile outlook of the specialized academy, specialized professional historians, which is an outlook that supports a fragmented and fractured view of the American past and of modern American society. And it fails to convey to young people the larger arc of that history. Or they reflect the outlook of radical critics of American society, like the late Howard Zinn, who you'll be hearing from authoritatively from Mary Graybar later in this program. His tendentious and shoddily researched People's History of the United States has sold about 3 million copies and has had an enormous and almost entirely baleful influence on the teaching of American history. So the result has been, and not just of Zinn, but Zinn is it's an important target. The result has been we're losing a sense, a general grasp of the public meaning of our own history. The professional historians have made, let me give my colleagues credit, they've made advances, steady advances in certain aspects of the study of the past, particularly social history, the experiences of marginalized or less articulate classes, slaves, for example. But these advances, and they are, I think, genuine advances, have come at the expense of a broadly shared public knowledge and shared historical consciousness. The American story has been fractured into 1,000 pieces and burdened with so much ideological baggage that the study of history may actually alienate young people from the possibility of properly understanding and appreciating their past and making it their own. The rising generations are being denied their birthright, their sense of participation in this vital enterprise, one of the peaks of human history, of which they're a part. I'll say in passing, one of the nicest compliments to the book was not given to me directly. I heard about it secondhand. This is always nice. From the late Roger Scruton, the British philosopher who just died a few weeks ago, and he said something to the effect that he has his usual British circumlocution, but it was this one, that this is a very fine book because it presents a view of the American past that an intelligent young person would be inclined to affiliate himself with and wish to be part of. I couldn't have asked for, I should have asked him to blurb my book, but I couldn't have asked for a better unsolicited expression of what it is I was trying to do with it. So this state of affairs that we're in now is parlous. It can't fail to have serious consequences down the long run, and maybe even in the short run, maybe even right now. A great nation needs and deserves a great national narrative, and it needs to convey that narrative to the rising generation effectively. It needs to form them in it if it's to perpetuate itself and sustain its defining aspirations in the face of these challenges that are thrown up by the present and the future. It goes without saying, but I'll say it, it can't be a fairy tale version of the American past. That we are, I think, too sophisticated, in a good sense of the word sophisticated, to fail to take into account the fact that our nation has a flawed history. So it can't be a whitewash of the past. It can't be convincing if it's not truthful. But the truth about the American past is not a harsh truth. It is a truth of which we can be very proud and very inspired by. But we've ceased to convey that in our educational system. So this combination of truthfulness and inspiration is exactly what I've tried to do in Land of Hope. And if I have time, and I probably won't, but tug on my coat if I'm getting to, I see 5 minutes. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to get to it. I was going to read you a couple passages, but let me read you this, which will summarize a lot. The epigraph to the book, the quotation that comes before the actual beginning of the book. Usually there's a little quotation from somebody. And I have a long one. It takes up the whole page. But it's so good that I couldn't trim it back. And it's from John Dos Passos, the great American novelist who was a fiercely radical man of the left early in the 20th century, and then saw the light and moved to the right. There's a little poem there. Yes, right. I should take another career as a poet. And he wrote some wonderful essays about American history. And I'm just going to read this one in my ebbing moments here. And contemplate this, how appropriate this is. Let me just tell you before I read it, it's written in 1941. And some of you in this room know what was going on in 1941, even before December 7th, 1941, that the world was at war. Hitler was dominating all of continental Europe. Only the British Isles were holding out. It was a very scary time for freedom-loving peoples. Okay, so here's Dos Passos. Every generation rewrites the past. In easy times, history is more or less of an ornamental art. But in times of danger, we're driven to the written record by a pressing need to find answers to the riddles of today. We need to know what kind of firm ground other men belonging to generations before us have found to stand on. In spite of changing conditions of life, they were not very different from ourselves. Their thoughts were the grandfathers of our thoughts. I love that, the grandfathers of our thoughts. They managed to meet situations as difficult as those we have to face, to meet them sometimes lightheartedly, and in some measure to make their hopes prevail. We need to know how they did it. And then he goes on. This is really the best part. In times of change and danger, where there's a quicksand of fear under men's reasoning, a sense of continuity with generations gone before can stretch like a lifeline across the scary present and get us past that idiot delusion of the exceptional now that blocks good thinking, the idea that we live in an unprecedented time. He says that's why in times like ours, when institutions are caving in and being replaced by new institutions, not necessarily in accord with most men's preconceived hopes, political thought has to look backwards as well as forwards. Wow, that could have been written right now, don't you think? In every respect, almost every word of it. And yet it was written in 1941 at this time of arguably far greater peril than what we are experiencing now. We complain about our rivenness as a nation and our loss of morale and all sorts of morality and all sorts of problems. But and these are grave problems. They may undo us. But one of the values of history, properly studied, is that it does provide that lifeline to the past and the recognition that others have conquered their problems. We should be able to, too, if we look to their example and gather strength and inspiration and courage from them. So, hope will give you hope. Thank you very much.